You are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder, where every day's Casual Friday. That means Monday is Casual Monday, Tuesday, Casual Tuesday, Wednesday, Casual Hump Day, Thursday, Casual Thurs, that's what we call it, and Friday, Casual Shabbat. The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Friday, May 10th, 2019. I'm Michael Brooks on a Casual Friday, and this is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We're broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA, on today's Casual Friday. Bhaskar Sunkara, founder of the Jacobin magazine, author of the Socialist Manifesto, the case for radical politics in an era of extreme inequality. We're talking socialist history, the path to dealing with extreme inequality, democratizing the economy, and the global climate ecological crisis. Plus, pretty good Twitter ad that Bhaskar cut for the Sanders campaign. Then the great David Feldman, host of the David Feldman Show, is here to give us a movie recommendation, argue over a recurring guest with me, and talk a little bit about the lawlessness of the Trump administration and the fecklessness of Democratic leadership. Donald Trump, as Juan Cole said, Donald Trump speaking is like the experiment with the monkey tapping randomly on the keyboard. Will it occasionally produce a work of Shakespeare? Well, some of the random spouting out of Trump's mouth has appeared to be offering Iran the same deal that Obama painstakingly achieved with them, with the negotiating partners. Even as right, I'm the only one that matters. Even as Pompeo continues to push for a global catastrophe with Iran. Iran lifts caps on uranium enrichment. Bernie Sanders' campaign staff has just signed a historic union contract. Bernie Sanders and AOC, not only are they proposing get tough rules on the predatory lending industry, the bill would include postal banking, while the Trump administration wants to allow debt collectors to harass people even more. Venezuelan lawmakers seek refuge in embassies after a crackdown, while Juan Guaido is like, I would be all right with, like, U.S. military intervention. Like, maybe this is not endogenous. Maybe we're going to need some more help, guys.
Oh, we're up to 1,000 on the stream. That's awesome. This crew's going well.
1,000 on the stream. Oh, that's really great. Still could use some help. Farmers...
Get into the super chat.
There's plenty of general level Patreon members open.
Yeah. Appreciate all the support. Gonna need a lot more to go before we get to that.
Question from the super chat on my interim status as presidency. We're gonna skip that one. But thanks for the question.
Those guys don't even really matter. Farmers are losing their patience with Donald Trump and his China trade war. And students walk out of the Colorado school shooting visual saying that their trauma is being politicized. And a San Francisco billionaire is wasting an extraordinary amount of money to solve a persistent but highly achievable problem to solve, which is getting rid of homelessness. He should just be dumping money into the Sanders campaign and other initiatives to jack his taxes up. Association of Jurists calls Lula da Silva a political prisoner, and the ANC looks set to return to power without need of a coalition in South Africa. All that and much, much more on today's Majority Report. So, as we've been highlighting the last couple of days, things are getting extraordinarily dangerous with regards to Iran. It's very important to emphasize, this is immediate history, that the Joint Plan of Action Agreement was working. There was no objective source, and no, even, by the way, one would presume highly biased source that questioned its efficacy. The Trump administration signed off on the deal early on. That trigger, by the way, that the Secretary of State, that the State Department had to re-sign the deal, I believe recertify it every 6 months, that's not part of the international agreement. That was a side poison pill inserted by Congress to beat Obama over the head for recertifying it, and presumably, I think what actually most Republicans also assumed would be a Democratic, a Hillary Clinton presidency. The Iranians have stepped out of the agreement to some extent, which, frankly, it makes a lot of sense. Why would they maintain an agreement? Their economy is being strangled. They've lived up to every end of the bargain. And the United States is dangerous, belligerent, dishonest, and bullying the Chinese and the Europeans. This is Mike Pompeo continuing on that path. I mean, listen to just... It's, you have to know the imperial hubris and the profound arrogance of this. This is Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Pause it. I can't hear it, guys. Okay.
What we've been trying to do is to get Iran to behave like a normal nation. We laid out 12 elements of that. Every single one of those elements is consistent with what we ask every other country in the world to do. So these are not Iran-specific, things like not conducting assassination campaigns around the world, not sponsoring terror organizations that inflict missile attacks on Israel, now 600 plus, not building missile systems in Yemen. I mean, these are things we ask every country to do. That's our objective. That's been our goal from the beginning. I've been working on this since I was a member of Congress. Our objective is to get the Islamic Republic of Iran to behave like a normal nation. When they do that, we will welcome them back.
So, and I have no doubt, yes, Mike Pompeo has been already a profoundly pernicious influence in foreign policy going back to his time in the House. But look, he mentions Yemen. The United States has partnered with Saudi Arabia in a campaign that murders and savages civilians on a daily basis in Yemen. The Houthi rebels were, in fact, not clients of Iran, and the relationship between them and the Iranian state has actually been significantly increased post Saudi U.S. supported mass murder campaign beginning in 2015. And, look, Israel certainly conducts assassination campaigns. Israel conducts collective punishment. The Saudis have an enormous amount of blood on their hands in Syria and Yemen, and of course have certainly funded and emanated terrorist groups. Again, does Iran engage in some of these behaviors? Undoubtedly. Does the United States engage in a lot of these behaviors? Undoubtedly. And obviously the Saudis and the Israelis. The point was that this agreement solved a very specific goal on proliferation and opened the door to potentially solving other problems. And that's why the world is in a much less safe place. But that's the plan and the agenda of people like Pompeo. They're dangerous extremists. Now, Donald Trump, again, I don't know how much we can buy into this, obviously, because the truth of the matter is that he doesn't have much. He doesn't think about these things. He has random impulses. His main trigger point with Iran was that Obama had a great foreign policy achievement, so he was aggrieved and needed to ruin it. But I think, even as this kind of never-ending push for regime change, for a coup in Venezuela continues to fail, I think that Trump seems to have some allergy, or maybe even as he gets back on the trail, some sense that part of his broader scheme was a kind of Buchananite message on non-intervention. So in this clip, first he's going to lie about John Kerry, and if anything, my sense is that John Kerry John Kerry has been out of office publicly trying to preserve a successful deal that made the world better that he helped negotiate. But Trump is, going to lie about him and threaten him with the Logan Act, which is very in keeping with the authoritarian nature of this regime. And then on the other hand, it looks like Donald Trump all of a sudden, and again, this maybe was maybe if the Iranians, as soon as Trump got into office, were like, hey, would you like to open some hotels here? And we have a new idea, my friend. The joint plan of action is called the Great Trump Peace Agreement. This problem's all might have been solved. Trump probably would have agreed to that within a matter of days. But here he is, basically begging the president of Iran to call him and offering the Obama deal. And if, North Korea is any indication, obviously, it would end up being an even more generous deal from an Iranian point of view. But here's Donald Trump.
What I'd like to see with Iran, I'd like to see them call me. John Kerry speaks to them a lot. John Kerry tells them not to call. That's a violation of the Logan Act. And frankly, he should be prosecuted on that. But my people don't want to do anything that's... Only the Democrats do that kind of stuff.
Historically, the Republicans did this, specifically Richard Nixon to the LBJ administration as they were trying to end the Vietnam
Right. Wasn't that the one that Kissinger was like a double agent at the Paris Peace Accords, specifically to prolong the Vietnam War to help Richard Nixon's electoral
he jumped
prospects?
from Rockefeller to Nixon using his connections with the Dragon Lady of Vietnam.
Of Taiwan. Shanghai Shek's wife.
Oh, right.
Shanghai Shek, yes. Major figure in right-wing politics. And, of course, there's a lot of interesting reporting on how long the hostages may have stayed there, potentially in additional days, when Ronald Reagan was running to deregulate Wall Street.
Only the Democrats do this stuff.
But I don't play tough like the Democrats.
I don't want to do anything that's... Only the Democrats do that kind of stuff,
Right.
If it were the opposite way, they'd prosecute him under the Logan Act. But John Kerry violated the Logan Act. He's talking to Iran and has many meetings and many phone calls, and he's telling them what to do. That is a total violation of the Logan Act.
Of course, Don Kerry released a statement saying that Donald Trump is wrong in every regard, essentially, and I think we can, of course, safely assume that he is. And by the way, if John Kerry is informally, and I'm sure with lawyer consultations within the letter of the law, having back channels to the Iranians, and I think it was reported a couple years ago that he might have met some people in Paris who had connections to the Islamic Republic and basically was saying, like, hold tight, this lunatic won't be president forever. Good. That's the most productive use of John Kerry's time. Thank you, John Kerry. Quote, and he said, I just want to say, just briefly from The Guardian, the Trump administration had previously insisted that Iran would have to fulfill a list of 12, this is the Pompeo thing, 12 wide-ranging conditions, including non-intervention in Syria, Yemen, and Iraq in order for sanctions to be lifted. Trump's remarks suggested that a new deal on the nuclear program would be enough. And Iran's ambassador to the UN said once again, this is the ambassador, the first question he has to answer is why he left the negotiating table, because we were talking to all participants of the nuclear deal, including the U.S. So all of a sudden he decided to leave the negotiating table. What is the guarantee that he will not renege again on the future talks between Iran and the U.S.? And this is Kerry's statement. Everything President Trump today said is simply wrong. End of story. He's wrong about the facts, wrong about the law, and soundly he's been wrong about how to use diplomacy to keep America safe.
I'm right about the Logan Act. I'm a constitutional scholar. And the Logan Act is when a country likes another prominent American leader more than they like our president.
It was named after a great man named Logan.
Who was a very loyal
He was
guy.
very loyal. And then Logan would have razor blades come out of his knuckles when he got mad. Is that right? What is it?
Oh, is that an X-Men
Thinking of
reference?
X-Men. I'm
I'm
trying to
the
think
wrong
of
guy.
Wolverine. Wolverine. Very loyal guy.
There's Logan, the one
Tough
with the
guy.
laser eyes. I don't know. I can't remember.
She had laser eyes because we don't control our borders anymore.
How many meetings are you having? Why am I not invited to these meetings? I do good meetings.
Does anybody think that maybe I'd like to meet Persian academics in Paris?
You guys can use a Trump hotel property.
Yeah, why can't we use a Trump hotel property? No one ever thinks. There's a phrase called wet our beaks.
Just feel a little bit left out.
Feel a little bit left out. And then he looked around and he said, the Don will get paid for this. After all, we are not communists. But that's what AOC wants. That's what Crazy Bernie wants. The Majority Report is supported in part by Simple Habit. Simple Habit is the mobile app that provides a massive and diverse library of 4 to 5 minute guided meditations. And the Majority Report audience can try Simple Habit totally free for an entire week when you go to simplehabit.com/majority. As I say, there's a growing body of scientific evidence on meditation's efficacy for everything from pain relief to depression and anxiety, particularly Richie Davidson's work in neuroimaging at the University of Wisconsin, but going back to Herbert Benson's work at the relaxation response at Harvard. Simple Habit has over 2,000 guided meditations specifically designed for different parts of your day and just about anything you might be dealing with in life. They have guided meditations for mindfulness, meditations for anxiety, for depression, and for when you're having trouble falling asleep. Meditations for when you're wanting to overcome procrastination, or when you're having something important going on at work. Meditations designed for parents. They have meditations made specifically for when you're waking up or on a lunch break or when you've just gotten home from work or when you're going to bed. I personally love the ease of the app, the range of options, the idea that I can try. Actually, just the other day, I tried the lunchtime. I went into the other room. I tried the lunchtime meditation right before, as I was about to get back on mic, and it was excellent. Different people are trying to accomplish different things with meditation, and Simple Habit is able to cater to just about anyone, regardless of what their goals with meditation are or how much experience they have. The variety of guided meditations on Simple Habit is what sets it apart. Simple Habit just won the 2018 Google Play Award for Best Wellbeing App. It's available on iOS, Android, and web browser. And the Majority Report audience can try it for free for a week by going to simplehabit.com/majority. If you're watching on YouTube, we've put a link in the video description. We'll be right back with Bhaskar Sunkara on the Majority Report. Welcome back to the Majority Report. Michael Brooks here, joining us now from the road where he's promoting his excellent new book, is Bhaskar Sunkara. The book is called The Socialist Manifesto, A Case for Radical Politics in an Era of Extreme Inequality. He's also the founder of Jacobin magazine, which is indispensable and everybody should be reading. Bhaskar, thanks so much for being here. How are you doing?
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's always a pleasure.
It's great to be speaking with you. So, as always, let's reset here. What do you think when now it's sort of, even relative to 3-4 years ago, and I think obviously the Sanders campaign had a lot to do with this, but socialism is kind of back in the discourse to the point where even like the Republicans think they can make a lot of hay about a sort of new kind of neo fear-mongering campaign about it. But you're somebody who, first of all, explain how you discovered Marxism and socialism, and why is it that you think, in contrast to the kind of old stereotypical comment about, I don't know, I think it's attributed to Churchill, but there's some lazy, like, if you're not a socialist by the time you're 20 or something, you don't have a heart. If you're not a conservative by the time you're 25, you don't have a brain. Some kind of, hackneyed sort of like, Buckley or fake Churchill quote type of thing like that. But you make the point that you came to Marxism from, obviously ethical conviction, but a very clinical analysis of how capitalism actually works, because Marx really demystified capitalism. Why is it? Yeah, go ahead. Why is it relevant for this time so specifically, and how did you come to it?
Well, yeah, I think for me, being a Marxist is a very useful framework for understanding the world. And you can't understand everything about the world just by being a Marxist. Marxism can't explain one of my friends likes to say, Marxism can't explain the sex appeal of blue jeans. It can't explain agriculture and genetics and a whole host of other stuff that in the past the Soviet Union tried to make, Marxism explain. But what it can do is tell us a bunch of pertinent things about the world, about, the spoil of resources, how things are divided up in a given society, about the pace and nature of technological change, about why there's so much needless suffering amid abundance, and why a system can be populated by good people, not all capitalists or sociopaths, but still produce really bad outcomes. So it's a very useful framework for understanding the world. But the reason why I first got attracted to these ideas was a moral and ethical kind of, I'm a socialist because I believe that there's too much exploitation in the world. I believe there's too much needless suffering. I believe that there's too much unquestioned hierarchy in the world, and I believe that one day we'll look back upon all the divisions and all the exploitation and all the suffering in the world today amid plenty, and we'll be like, this is irrational. The same way today anyone would look back at feudalism and the divine right of kings and queens and say, wow, that was kind of irrational. You just let this crazy person with syphilis run a country as an autocratic, monarch for 50 years and kill hundreds of people and thousands of people. So I think that's the separation. Marxism is the intellectual framework that you get some things from. Being a socialist is something deep in your heart. And what I want to do with this book is take people with the right moral impulses, or take people at the very least who look around in society and say things maybe could be different, and give them some of the history and the past of the various attempts to make the world a better place, and show here's where they succeeded, here's where they failed, here's why I think these ideas are still relevant going forward into the future.
So can you take us back to maybe, again, I'll give you two parts. First of all, what is Marx's idea of modes of production producing different types of societal relationships and political arrangements? You mentioned, feudalism to capitalism. Then the idea, I guess, would be, capitalism to socialism. Let's just start with that. What is that sort of trajectory he's mapping, and maybe can you explain how it's not linear or teleological? It's it's relational and dynamic, but it still does reflect some type of evolution or development or progression. And we're in maybe the middle of some very interesting times, and in terms of that model. How does that work? Where does that come from? Where does that thinking come from?
So capitalism is a unique system compared to these other systems we've had before. So we've always had class societies, at least since the Neolithic Revolution, until we created these, permanent farmer societies and we settled roots, we had kind of the division between classes. So in other words, there was a majority class that did most of the work, and there was a minority that appropriated their surplus and directed it as they saw fit. Back during feudalism, it was pretty easy to see how the system worked because you'd be the only person toiling your land, let's say as a peasant. And at the end of this harvest season, the Lord would come and say, give me 30% of your crop or you're going to die. It's pretty obvious the naked exploitation of, you're giving them something. But at the same time, you had the means of your own self-sufficiency. You had a way, you had kind of your own land to sow. You had a way to survive kind of by yourself. What capitalism is a condition in which we all become market dependent. So by that I mean there were markets before capitalism, there'll be markets after capitalism. But under capitalism, the majority class is deprived of any means to sustain themselves other than by selling their labor power, their ability to work for others, to a capitalist. And by capitalist, all we mean is that the people who control the firms that create the goods and services that society produces. So we labor for these capitalists, but they're not making money literally off of our sweat. They're producing these commodities, and they're selling these commodities in the market. And even if they want to be nice and give us higher wages, they would just probably get undercut by competitors that were even more ruthless and were able to reinvest more of their profits into the expansion of production. So whereas the market existed before, it has now become the all-consuming task of humanity to constantly expand and keep producing more and more at higher levels of efficiency and so on. And this has created tremendous wealth and abundance. No Marxist would deny that in many ways this is the pinnacle of human civilization. Like, look what we've managed to kind of transform the world for both good and bad, but mostly for good in the past 100 plus 200 years under capitalism. Our argument is that so much abundance has been created that socially, so the labor of thousands of people being brought together, millions of people being brought together, there must be some better way to distribute wealth and power. There must be a way to take this social production and not have it be run in a social way through the dictatorship of a small group of bosses and CEOs, and instead run the economy in a democratic way. So that's the premise of socialism. It's building off the development of capitalism, the high point of capitalism. It's not saying that we started year zero and we're back in the fields, sowing crops and things like that.
So in this, another thing that you do really effectively in this book, and I think it is worth, highlighting two things in that statement, right? So one, it truly is like a global system. So like even like the paradox of, like places that are like on the extreme end of, like, say in the media sense, they're covered as a place of civil war and instability. They're, I'm thinking of the Congo, right? It's dealt with, the United States install the CIA, the Belgians assassinated a great independence leader, Patrice Lumumba. Then they backed this, vicious dictator from the 60s, literally through the mid-90s, Mobutu Sese Seko, and then it's been in varying states of civil war. There's all of these different dimensions of the crisis of Congo. And then conversely, the Democratic Republic of Congo, the rare minerals that are mined from Congo are in all of our phones and central to the most complex parts of a global supply chain. So there's really like almost no corner of earth that is not part of this system. And similarly with Marx, Marxism went absolutely everywhere. There isn't a country on earth where these ideas didn't find some relevance, which is pretty extraordinary. And I think, I wanted to set that because you do also a really good job of this book of like disaggregating the different streams of Marxism. And I'm wondering if you can go back even just into the history of Marx and Engels, and what did Marxism and socialism first start looking like as a political project in those times, in terms of whether it's electoral or labor or revolutionary? What are the different streams that we start to get?
Yeah. So the logic was pretty common sense, it seemed, to the socialists of the 19th century. They thought that their primary struggle, or one of their big struggles, was fighting for trade unions and basic kind of organizations of class consciousness, and fighting for suffrage, fighting for more democracy. So this was the Chartist movement in the UK was all about. What all these other movements, the early struggles of the German Social Democratic Party, they were struggles to expand the franchise to working people. Because in most of these countries, to the extent there was any political democracy, it was limited to those who owned property. So it was the old landed gentry, and it was the new industrialists that were fighting and divvying up power. And the idea was this new emerging working class, this group of millions of people that were ripped from the countryside and now hoarded into these cities and working at these giant factories and complexes, these people would get the vote, and through the exercise of their franchise, they would naturally start voting for policies that were in their class interest. So in other words, it was seen as like a natural dynamic. Workers get the right to vote, workers organize, workers form workers' parties. These worker parties start legislating social and economic reforms and continue on the struggle for socialism, a system in which this voting majority, this majority class, takes over production and governs society generally in their interests. Now, obviously it didn't work quite this way, but it seemed like it was in the late 19th century. So there were these mass parties. The most important of them is the German Social Democratic Party. But we saw what happens over time, which is that, well, in fact, these workers in these big parties are kind of dependent on their bosses. They are under a lot of pressures to compromise with the nation state that they're a part of. They realize that they win reforms and win gains often not just from confrontation, but from making compromises with their employers. They maybe decide, hey, wouldn't it be better off if we just tame the system a little bit and keep it humming and then redistribute some of the wealth that it's creating instead of forging a new system entirely? So this is where modern social democracy comes from. It was the attempt to just add doses of socialism within capitalism. Then there's a left wing of this big workers' movement, and it happens mostly in countries where the democratic road to social democracy, to socialism, was blocked. So the socialists have to pursue more insurrectionary, more revolutionary roads. So this is kind of Russia and the Soviet Union and all these cases. This is kind of the left wing, I guess you could say, of this broad workers' movement. But they had this common ancestor. And what I wanted to do in the book was to avoid the no true Scotsman thing, where you just say, oh, that's not real socialism.
Right.
Socialism is only the thing I like. And oh, if it's not democratic, it's not socialism. You know, obviously I have my vision of socialism, which is a democratic, anti-authoritarian, anti-hierarchical vision of socialism. But a lot of these experiences, positively and negatively, have important lessons for us to draw from. And all these movements are drawn from this early workers' movement. And obviously even these revolutionary movements in the Third World that fought for national liberation against imperialism and fought for development, a lot of them were inspired by the Soviet example, because the Soviet Union started off as an extremely backward, war-ravaged country in which the task became not how do you take the spoils of a rich society and make sure workers get their fair share and make sure there's working-class democracy, but rather how do you generate wealth to begin with. And I think that was the root of some of its totalitarianism or some of these dilemmas. But it was quite inspiring for people living in the Third World. It was inspiring for the Chinese revolutionaries and other people to say, look what the Soviet Union did in just 5 years. They caught up with the West. So I cover all this history, and I try to do it in a way that doesn't claim to be a book of history, but as an illustrative history where we could take some of these case studies, take some of these lessons, figure out what's relevant, what should we keep from this history, what we should discard. And I think it's an important part of it, because otherwise it would just be kind of the a purely moral argument. But socialism has actually been tried, and it's had its successes, but it's had its massive failure. And it doesn't do us any good if we're on the left to pretend like it hasn't.
So I think that's a really important distinction, and because I think it's both for actually not shying away from, even as an example, the fact that the Soviet Union, was on the right side of, the United States was supported apartheid. The Soviet Union backed the African National Congress, right? I mean, so, very strong point for the Soviet Union. Before Soviet imperialism in Afghanistan in the 80s, which is absolutely what I would call an intervention and the atrocities that they committed. But on the other hand, the Sour Revolution and some of the communist ideology of Afghanistan was incredibly progressive and interesting and innovative, and also helps us kind of historicize away from the typical anti-Muslim narratives.
But even in that case, if you think about who made the Sour Revolution,
it was
a group of military. It was Afghans, but it was a group of military officers and intellectuals and people who were basically I hate to put it this way, but the modern classes in a society is still largely pre-modern. Right. And what happened when they tried to impose socialism and modernity from above, it led to a reaction, it led to civil war, and it led to a lot of the disasters that we've seen in that country for the last 20, 30 years. So even the best intentions, the best of our intentions have ended up sometimes in a bad place. And I wanted to look at some of that history and figure out why, while at the same time saying, listen, we're in the West. We're in countries that have really long established history of democracy. We're in countries where most of our fights today are for these broad programs like Medicare for All. We are in a very different context than trying to create a revolution in Afghanistan. And we have tons of we're very privileged in our position today. But obviously, if we don't know this history, if we don't have kind of strong replies, then we're going to end up just looking like idiots when people try to red bait us with some of the stuff.
And then we could, and I think that we can disentangle, and we'll get to Sanders in a couple of minutes, but I think, the very clear, essentially anti-regime change, a foreign policy that isn't dictated by a narrow set of interests here is the corollary. And then in the situations, inside the United States as an example, this is where you also start to foreground, ideas and histories which maybe they don't, they might be less alluring in a freshman dorm room, but they might in some ways be more relevant to a, hyper-developed 2019 context. So talk about Olof Palme and what happened in Sweden in the 1970s and what you're drawing from that.
Yeah, I think, well, one thing I should say before people just think it's a book of history, I try to open with a case for socialism and kind of a thought experiment of what a day in the life of a socialist citizen should look like. So I really did intend the book to be kind of the first book about socialism that a lot of people are gonna read, and it's meant to not scare off my Bernie-crat friends. And I've been doing some stuff lately with my friends in the Sanders campaign, and I've been I'm about gearing up to do some canvassing for Sanders. So that was the intended audience, I should say. But
yes, sir.
Social democracy is super interesting for me because I started off as a far-left radical who had no interest in social democracy. It's like, oh, well, that's just a kinder, gentler capitalism. Then over time, the more study, the more research I did of social democracy, particularly the Nordic model, particularly in Sweden, you'd find out that, these models were actually imposed not by the generosity of capitalists. Oh, the Nordic capitalists, they're cozier, friendlier, people. But in fact, it was imposed by force, by militant working class movement. So over time, over the course of governing for 50, 60 years in Sweden, the Social Democrats were able to decommodify, which means just taking out of the market whole spheres of life, like some degree housing. They built 1 million new homes for public housing, 1 million units for a population of just 8 million. Healthcare, childcare eventually. All these things were taken out of the market and enjoyed as social rights. So it was a very good society in that sense. I think it's probably the peak of what we achieved as as a species. If you were born in a poor rural part of Sweden, you had a very similar life outcome to if you were born in a nice district in Stockholm. And that's something you can't say about someone born in Fairfield, Connecticut versus Waterbury or something like that. It's something that we shouldn't take for granted. Yeah, Bridgeport, which is, I've spent plenty of time in my life, actually. It's a very depressing city.
Yes.
So, enough about Bridgeport, Connecticut. That's where we lose the audience.
Hey, I have a lot of, it's a great ferry. Just saying, there's a lot of, capitalism is a problem.
Yep. No, definitely. I mean, this is the kind of the uneven, development, but it's kind of the stuff that we take for granted. The fact that, that kid's from that city, right. One screwed. We, as Americans, even those of us on the left, we kind of just take for granted that this is like a normal thing.
Right.
But it wasn't just that they achieved this base level of equality and dignity and justice for their citizens, and it wasn't just that Olof Palme and these other leaders fought to defend the ANC and to struggle against apartheid and to defend the Vietnamese and to struggle against U.S. imperialism in Vietnam. So they also had a good track record in foreign policy.
Yep.
But these demands and these welfare state securities didn't, like many Leninists thought it would, it didn't make them complacent. It actually caused workers to start demanding more and more radical things, and to start to make inroads on the profits of capitalists, but also their right to manage, the right of managers to manage. So in 1967, 1968, you see a mass strike wave in Sweden that's primarily about industrial democracy, not just wages and working conditions. So they start to put more radical questions on the table. They start to say, well, why don't we have any say in our day-to-day lives? We're spending 40 hours a week in this workplace. Why don't we have any say? Eventually they say, why don't we actually own some of this workplace? And there's a plan in the 70s put forward, the Meidner Plan, that's improved, massively approved by the Maid Trade Union Federation in Sweden, that would have slowly over time socialized production in Sweden. So what social democracy did was it increased the bargaining position of workers dramatically, but it left the levers of control in the hands of capitalists. So the capitalists seeing all this stuff to say, hold on, we're getting screwed by this intensifying internationalization of the economy in the 70s. The OPEC shock is hurting us. These wage demands are cutting into our profits. There's all these things going on. We're going to either leave capital flight or we're going to withhold investment. We're just not going to invest in new firms and expand our production until conditions change. Now, this is a blackmail that capitalists have in any capitalist democracy, even a social democracy. So what the left wing of social democracy in Sweden proposed were these wage earner funds essentially trying to socialize more production, taking away their power to withhold investment in this blackmail they had. The right wing of social democracy, people like in the UK, Gordon Brown, in Germany, Schroeder, these people had a solution to the crisis that involved retreating. All right, let's take a few steps back. Let's deregulate a little bit. Let's make capitalists happy. Then we'll try to redistribute some of the wealth that's being created to sustain, 80% of our existing welfare state. This was the gamble of the third way of social democracy. But I believe that there was a route to socialism through the left wing of social democracy. And the way that I came to see it through reading and research and really engaging seriously with the history of social democracy was it's not a separate playing field. Social democracy was getting the ball into the red zone, then getting pushed back just out of field goal position.
Right.
But what we want is a touchdown. We want to figure out a way to win the game, and that involves, I think, taking power away from capital and extending the democratic logic of social democracy. That, as by virtue of being humans, we have certain rights. We should, if democracy is a good thing in the ballot box, also have democracy in our workplaces. By extending this logic deeper, we actually have a chance to get to social democracy. So what I see Sanders and Corbyn and all these people doing is bringing back the language of class struggle, the language of social democracy. And I don't think it's enough, but if you can't put the question of Medicare for all on the table in the U.S. today, about decommodifying healthcare, how are you going to put the question of worker ownership in the means of production? The people on the left that are excited about one but not excited about the common sense thing that 70% of Americans support, do baffle me.
They absolutely baffle me too. And then of course, I think people, maybe they baffle me less, but some people who don't see, particularly if they're saying that they have a more kind of structurally left politics, even of a social democratic variety, and they don't see the structural case and what Sanders is doing that is a completely unique value proposition in modern politics. Even relative to other candidates that, we like and respect, that also frustrates me. And maybe I want to get into what Sanders is doing that no one else is doing. But first, I do want to play this ad. This is something that, you released or the Sanders campaign released for you. And I think this actually very eloquently distills this in the language of an ad. So let's play this and I'll throw it to you, Bhaskar.
We know how important it is to defeat Trump in 2020, but I'm afraid that after Trump, a right populism might exist in the U.S. for a long time to come. Sanders gives us the opportunity to not just win one election, but to create the vast progressive majority that can win election after election. This isn't a 4-year project. This is an 8-year project. This is a project to remake America and remake American politics for the next 10, 15, 20 years. For decades, working people in the United States have been told over and over again that it's their fault. You lost your job, it's your fault. Maybe you should reformat your CV. Maybe you should take a coding class. You're drifting deeper and deeper in medical debt. It's your fault. Maybe you should have seen the doctor more. Maybe you should start doing yoga, exercising a bit more. All these messages have been telling people that the problems of society were individual failings. That's why I was so inspired by the Sanders campaign, because in 2016, and again now, millions of people are realizing that it's not their fault. In fact, they should be expecting and demanding more, and that collectively we could fight for things like Medicare for all. We could fight for things like a safe and sustainable environmental policy that will keep the planet going for our future generations. What we need is a return to shared prosperity and justice for all people. That's why I'm supporting Bernie Sanders.
I like the little look off you do at the end. Like, was that?
Yeah, I didn't
do we
mean to
lock
do that.
that?
I was like, are we still rolling? Yeah, I feel I'm embarrassed they kept that, but I love that the music behind me is like clearly the soundtrack to NBA Live 1999 or something. It's really incredible.
I was going to say it kind of felt a little bit like almost a little, they were more mellow, but I thought of almost like Diggable Planets or something. Like it had a very it did have a good 90s vibe to it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a throwback, and I'm still living in the past until the Knicks get KD. Then I'm ready to embrace 2019. Until then, I'm living in '99.
And then after a couple of months, when KD hurts his ankle or something, you'll be back to '99.
Well, I feel like that would just remind me of why I'm a Knicks fan. It's like
because
religion.
Of the struggle.
It's like the suffering is part of it.
The noble,
we have to pay the penance.
The beautiful struggle. Actually, okay. Well, I have a ridiculous question to ask you, but first let me just do this parenthetically. If Bill Bradley, who was a legendary Knick and probably I would say Barack Obama and Bill Bradley are like the best neoliberalism had to offer. If Bradley was to Bradley versus Sanders, who are you picking?
Oh, obviously I would choose Sanders. Come on.
Okay. Hey, I'm just testing your Knicks fandom.
That's easy.
All right. Fair enough.
But I would say, yeah, Bradley, Obama, even Adam Silver, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver. These seems like the type of neoliberals you could have a quick lunch with. You know what I mean?
Quick.
They wouldn't drive you absolutely crazy. You would just want to cut everything off at the 35-minute mark.
I think you're exactly right. So what does Sanders bring to the table that is distinct in terms of activating people and also for that much longer term struggle? Because I agree with you. I've been saying for a really long time, I don't agree with framing the election on only this or that candidate can beat Trump. I think a lot of them could beat Trump, or horrifyingly, we might be in a position where maybe very few of them can beat Trump, right? But the point is that Joe Biden could definitely beat Trump. I think people on our side of the equation have steadily underestimated his appeal, unfortunately. But what happens in 2022? I mean, if you have yet another cycle of unresponsive mediocrity, while all of the crises of society are untreated, granted the emergency of the white supremacist, corrupt Trump administration, of course, needs to be removed, period. But that's just getting back to a basic baseline where we're not fighting savagery like kidnapping children, which is absolutely essential, but it is not long-term durable for inequality, for the climate, for police, for all of these other issues that are structural and long-term. What is Sanders bringing to this that no one else has for at least the potential of getting out of a broader predicament?
Yeah, it's not just defeating Trump, it's about defeating Trumpism, right? And I think we have to think about what was the appeal of Trump. Now, obviously, hardcore Trump supporters are the racists or the xenophobes that we can't win over under any circumstance. Then a big chunk of his base are just traditional, wealthier Republican voters that we don't want in our coalition.
Right.
But let's find that 25% of the Trump base, and let's think about what motivated these people. And I think part of it was anger. Part of it was, I'm going to do the thing that the political establishment doesn't want me to do. And for me, what spoke to them from Trump was speaking to the anger. And that's something that Sanders can summon, but these other Democratic candidates aren't really meaningfully summoning. The idea that, I want people to blame. And that's why he keeps saying millionaires and billionaires. He's naming some names. He's saying stop Jeff Bezos. He's saying all these things that I think are summoning kind of a passion and anger that's out there. People are fed up, and either they're going to vote with their anger, or they're going to vote out of fear. I think you're right, by the way, enough people would vote out of fear and say, we don't want, Trump. This guy is like too much.
Yeah.
So you will get a good turnout this election. I think Biden will probably beat Trump.
Yes.
But then there's going to be, I think, a chunk of people that are potentially going to stay at home, maybe not in this election, but in the next election. If it doesn't seem like things are changing, if it doesn't seem like the Democrats are trustworthy, if all they have to offer is we're not Republicans, it's not a very strong appeal. It's not a strong message, and that's something that really Hillary Clinton didn't motivate people to vote. It was Latino voters not showing up. It was black voters not showing up. It wasn't just white working class voters switching over in a few swing states. It was more just the people getting fed up and just not wanting to show up. And who could really blame them on especially if you're working 8 to 6 on election day,
right.
You have kids at home, you have all the stress, you don't even get the day off. Are you going to stand in line for an hour to vote for someone who doesn't inspire you? It's a tough ask.
Well, right, and that's actually why the best thing the Democrats have actually done in the House is introduce a really good voting rights package, which is essential and shocking that morally and strategically they haven't been pushing for decades. But, that being, I think, and again, whether it's 25% of Trump voters, I might think it's 2 or 3%, frankly. But that 2 or 3% is geographically.
You can swing an election.
They're located in the map that you need to win. And just to put a fine point on it, because I do think that this distinction is arising, and I've, my position for a long time, and I know you have to go in a minute, has definitely been, look, even candidates that I don't, have any trust for at all, in terms of their commitment to these things, like Beto O'Rourke or Christian Gillibrand or whoever, if people are coming on board for single payer, postal banking, or whatever, that's great. Let's give them praise. But now we're in an election, and now it's like I think it's even important to start in a collegial, respectful way, because again, I do draw a red line. I do think it's Bernie and Warren. I think it's Bernie on his own in terms of distinct contribution, but I do think it's Bernie and Warren versus the rest of the field, in the sense that Warren is clearly infinitely preferable to, it goes without saying, Biden, but certainly any of the other, centrist, center-right candidates.
I think there's a big gap between Bernie and Warren, but I think there's an equally big, if not bigger, gap between Warren and everyone else.
Right, I agree. That's exactly how I'd put it. But what is that distinction between this broader strategic argument and just putting out a lot of really good policy proposals, which is great and essential, but it feeds, in my view, the same kind of failings of a certain belief in technocracy versus power. That's at least how I'd frame it. But what do you think?
Well, I think that Warren at heart is a regulator, right? She wants a fairer, better capitalism. She wants capitalism where the rules are clear and it's not rigged against working people. Sanders, I think, is more fundamentally questioning the system.
Right.
I think he's been a far more resolute defender of Medicare for all.
Yep.
I think, and that's probably the most radical part of his program, just the way he wants to take on the health insurance industry through a full frontal, assault. Now, looking at her response to Medicare for all makes me worry that Warren would choose maybe the path of preemptive compromise, whereas Sanders will at least try to tackle these interests and name names a little bit more. But more importantly, I think, is the fact that Sanders is actually galvanizing a grassroots of millions of people in a way that Warren isn't. So we have to think about who just won't be the better president to pass some policy for the next 4 years or 8 years. We have to think about who can create the opposition movement or the foundation of a long-term opposition movement for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So if you're a progressive, if you're a socialist, we have to be thinking about how do we remake American politics the next 5 to 20 years. Our job won't be done in 2020. It won't be done even in 2024. And it seems to me that Sanders is the one capable of really galvanizing passions and pushing in that direction.
Yeah, I mean, that's precisely my take. And I also recommend always Megan Day, who I've interviewed plenty of times and is another great writer, the Jacobin. She really put this very well recently. The book is The Socialist Manifesto, The Case for Radical Politics in an Age of Extreme Income and Extreme Inequality. We didn't even talk about the ecological collapse that we're on the verge of. I will say that Bhaskar is also a regular on TMBS, and I'll be talking with him again soon. But definitely buy this book, get your subscription to the Jacobin, help forward these visions, these ideas, and also these movements. Bhaskar, thanks so much for doing this.
Yep, that's great. Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. Take care. All right, folks, we're going to take a brief break, and we're going to come back with a comedian by the name of David Feldman. Yeah, we can go. We can take a break. We can do it.
Thanks for all you shown us. This is how we feel. Come sit next to me, pour yourself some tea. Just like grandma made when combines me. Things were better then, once but never again. We've all left the den and tight by choo-choo train left right on time. A ticket costs only your mind.
Welcome back to the Majority Report Casual Friday. Michael Brooks here. Joining us now is the host, the illustrious host of the David Feldman Show. He's also a comedy writer, stand-up comedian. You've seen his work in any number of television outlets. He's written for all sorts of people, including people that I make fun of on a fairly consistent basis. David Feldman, thanks for being here.
Hi.
Thank you so much for doing this.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you very well. I'm assuming Matt, Brendan,
Okay.
can you guys hear DF?
Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so I just have to keep this short because I'm doing Sam Cedar's show today.
Really?
So, until they call me, because I'm expecting a call from Sam Cedar. So the minute he calls, I have to hang up. But I love your show. So
Yeah, you like the sort of A for effort kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
David, you had a couple requests for me before we came on. You wanted to, and people are jonesing over this, but I guess we'll get to that later. But you had something that you wanted to say about Ben Shapiro. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with everything he stands for.
Right.
In principle,
In principle, uh-huh.
But in principle, here's the thing: I watched the clip of his walking off that BBC interview, and I'm opposed to this man in principle, but I think he realized if you watch during that interview, it dawns on Ben that he's talking to somebody from England, and he walked off because he didn't want to violate the Logan Act.
So in other words, okay, so I'm assuming because the Logan Act is in the news because Donald Trump has accused John Kerry of violating the Logan Act. And you think what actually happened is that Ben Shapiro is so, as the New York Times called him the cool kid's philosopher, he's so acute intellectually that he thought to himself, wait a second, I'm BBC, British government, who funds it? That's a public broadcast. Logan Act, I got to get out of here.
He's in violating of I think it's called the Logan Paul Act. I don't know. I studied this kind of stuff.
Did you, so he wasn't having a temper.
Into the weeds.
Okay, but we won't get into the weeds. But in other words, he wasn't having a temper tantrum. He was just trying to obey the law.
There is a law on the book, and I get. I don't want to come off as too esoteric, and because I know you're a big picture guy. You don't get into the weeds on minutia, but it's actually called the Logan Paul Act. And it outlaws YouTube celebrities from trivializing suicide. So it's the Logan Paul Act, and Ben he does not want to trivialize suicide the way Logan Paul did. It's against the law.
Did you think?
By the way, I have a comedy writer. If I could work for Logan Paul, I would be so happy. He's the voice of a generation.
Oh, thank you. Did you think when you were coming up in show business that one day there would be a way to build like a pundit profile for yourself? Not just a pundit profile, but a pundit profile as like a preeminent conservative intellectual by humiliating 19-year-olds in college campuses and then getting them clipped up for the internet? Did you anticipate that?
Well, I used to humiliate college co-eds when I was in college, but I didn't know you could make money doing that.
You had no idea.
I never.
By telling them that they were stupid, that you could get clipped and get paid by oligarchs to give talks.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to get paid playing video games.
Right.
I'm looking into that.
Did you see the ad that Delta did? They encouraging their people not to join a union because for their union dues they could buy a game console.
Listen. You know that I am pro-union in principle, right?
In principle, yes.
In principle, yeah. But the labor movement is only about 150 years old. We have to go slowly on this,
right?
So, and Delta, yes, theoretically, in principle, I would love my stewardesses and my pilots to have health care because, I don't want them to crash the plane. In principle, I don't want them to crash the plane. But we have to be adults, okay?
So, David, I'm sensing a theme here with this in principle and, sort of abstract goals versus concrete actions. And it's disturbing me because I thought that you were a Bernie supporter, but you sound to me like you might be switching sides here to someone like Biden or Buttigieg.
No. Oh, no, come on now. I love Bernie.
Okay, good.
I love Bernie in principle. I and you know me. We've had you know
yes.
that my heart bleeds when we talk about socialized medicine and the 60,000 Americans who die each year because they're underinsured. You've seen my eyes well up.
Yep.
I care.
Yep.
You know that. But right now, we need to put everything on the back burner and defeat Trump.
Oh.
Now is not the time to worry about the 33% of American children who are food insecure, or that we have only 11 years before the planet is destroyed. We have a constitutional crisis, and those only come around every 3 years. This is a constitutional crisis because we have to stop everything to figure out what the subpoena power is of the House Judiciary Committee. Because if Jerry Nadler cannot have Mueller testify before the House Judiciary Committee, everything will fall apart. The whole world will come crashing down.
Yeah.
And we have to be adults.
Right.
And put everything on the back burner and focus on defeating Trump. Not impeachment, just defeating Trump.
Well,
and then we can focus on the important stuff.
Right. Naturally. I mean, I think that you're reflecting certainly that sounds like the opinion of most of the Democratic leadership. But I'm confused by this, David. And, I think we have a little bit of a different perspective on this. But I'm genuinely confused because I'm totally we have to defeat Trump and also make sure that the food supply stays on Earth. And, and those 33% of children that are food insecure, we need to take care of immediately. We can't backburner it.
Yes.
So that's why I'm voting for Sanders. But that being said, I don't.
You can't win. I don't mean to interrupt you. You can't win.
Can we get to that in a second?
Win.
Can we get to that in a second, though? I disagree with you, but I want to talk about why
I want to ask you a question.
Why can't Congress? And I'm serious, David, because I don't spend any time talking about Mueller or any of this stuff. But it seems to me that regardless of what you think of Russia or blah blah blah, that Donald Trump has broken the law repeatedly. Mnuchin is ignoring Congress. Barr is ignoring Congress. Why, if this actually is a problem, why can't they impeach him today instead of all of these telephone games that they're playing all the time? Explain that to me.
Okay. First of all, we're on the same team, right? So we're not going to do the circular firing squad here,
sure.
Because the last thing we want is the Democratic Party to hive off into separate little groups and not show up on Election Day to defeat Trump. So let me just say up front, and my eyes are welling up right now, and you know that I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. So we're on the same team,
right?
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and again, I love Bernie, and I believe in everything this man stands for in principle. So let me talk to you about why you can't impeach.
Okay. Why can't we impeach?
You can't impeach because we're a nation of laws, and the American people need to be taught a lesson that nobody is above the law. That's why we can't impeach. That's why. That's why Lori Loughlin and Felicity Huffman are going to prison. Not that their crimes were that bad, but we have to set an example and remind the Americans that everybody has to play by the rules, including Congress. And Trump has to go. He has to be defeated by the American people, but the Democrats have to play by the rules. And the rules are Democrats don't do anything.
until or
You
what is
have
it?
to obey the rules.
So the rules are is that what Elijah Cummings meant, Congressman Elijah Cummings, when he said the American people need to wake up? And he said that yesterday, and some of us were a little bit like, I thought, didn't we give the Democrats congressmen?
Yes, to be reminded of what makes America great. To
in
tell
principle.
Us, in principle, but to actually go through an impeachment that will alienate the vast swaths of Americans who don't think impeachment is right.
Right.
We have to worry more about what the crowds think, what the mob thinks, and the rule of law. Which, this is like, I don't mean to get esoteric and in the weeds with you, because
right.
I know you're a big picture guy.
I'm what they call an ideas man. Really, I don't like to talk about people. I like to talk about ideas.
Yeah. And believe me, no, I would like to take Donald Trump out into the, back behind the schoolyard and, punch him. Believe me.
Right.
I'd like to knock him out. But no, you got to be adults. You got to be adults.
So every poll suggests that Bernie Sanders is one of the most popular politicians in the country, and that he runs well head to head with Donald Trump. I wouldn't necessarily put too much weight into any poll at this time, but I will. He's one of the only people in American politics that has stayed steadily positive with a lot of exposure, and the sights of the Democratic establishment and the Republicans all raining in on him. Why do you think he's unelectable?
Well, I think he's clearly unelectable. The polls, go to his rallies.
Okay.
Have you been to any of his rallies? Because,
yes,
we're trying to, you can't win unless you get those white, working man, male Democratic moderates.
Right.
You can't win an election without them. And if you go to a Bernie rally, it's very threatening to ordinary Americans. The crowds are way too big. They're very boisterous, enthusiastic.
Right.
Did you see Bernie at the town hall on Fox News? If that wasn't a reason not to vote for him, because he does something to an audience. He won over the town hall, the Fox News town hall, and that's very threatening to Democrats like me who live on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And you cannot win an election without appealing to us.
Right.
It's almost demagogic the way he tells people not only what they want to hear, but what they actually need.
Right.
You can't win an election by appealing to the American people's actual needs. That's not what Democrats do, and we have to obey the laws. There are laws. Democrats just are nostalgic. That's all.
Right. So in other words, if you're making, like, say you're making under $40,000 a year, and maybe you're working two jobs, maybe you're about to lose a job, and you're in Pennsylvania.
I don't want to hear about that. I know. I don't want to hear about that.
Right. You wouldn't want to hear about that, but maybe that person. But who knows? Maybe the preoccupations.
Are there people like that?
I think there's a lot of people like that. Yeah, I think even if you walked, even to this day with all the gentrification, you could walk, 20, 30 blocks up from where you are and find some people really catching a lot of hell on the Upper East Side.
Okay, so just help me out here because I'm a details guy. Okay. I talk to Rob Reiner a lot, and I don't want to lord my relationship with Rob Reiner over you because we really get into policy. When you say $40,000 a year working two jobs,
right?
That doesn't qualify as middle class, as I understand it, right?
Well, I think I think you might. I don't know what the number is, but I know that the official government numbers on a lot of these things are actually not very generous. So I don't know.
Well, all I know is
I don't know what officially puts you.
Joe.
Okay, you're going for. Okay, yeah. So why do you think that Joe Biden, because again, I noticed with the taking Donald Trump behind the school, that was a Joe Biden line. So clearly you've been imbibing Biden. Why do you think Joe Biden is the right way to go? What makes him the most electable?
Because he's middle class.
Right.
And you can't win the election without appealing to the middle class. And, Bernie is focusing on, the lower classes. And that's not what the Democratic Party is about. We're about the middle class, not the 150 million Americans who can't scrape up $500 in case of an emergency. I get that. 150 million Americans, nearly half this country, can't find $500 without going into debt. That's not who we're going after. We're going after the middle class. Eventually, I'm concerned. And look, I don't know if this is the phone, but my eyes are welling up right now when I think about those people. And I've had a lot of tragedy in my life. You know that, right?
Absolutely.
So I can relate pain and suffering. You know that I can relate to pain and suffering. My son fell in love with a widow in my. Anyway, I don't even want to get into. But I can relate to pain and suffering, but I'm middle class.
Right.
I made a lot of money, but I'm middle class in my thinking, and it's incrementalism. We'll work our way down. Let's just start with focusing on the middle class, and then we'll work our way down to starving children in America.
Sure.
But let's do it incrementally, and that's what I love about Joe Biden. He's an adult.
He's definitely certainly an adult. When you think so I think we just have a disagreement about what we need to take care of and how fast we need to take care of things. But you said earlier, and even the middle class, because
Hey, it's not me. It's Rob Reiner.
So
Rob
tell Rob Reiner about the barbell economy. But I don't want to get into the weeds.
The barbell economy.
It's the idea that it's all, and it's probably not even a great image because there's way more in the bottom, obviously, than at the top. But the idea is that the weight is on the top is on two sides, and the middle there's nothing in the middle. The middle is just the bar.
What's the hockey stick?
I don't know. That's a climate change.
I like
thing.
the hockey stick.
Well, the
hockey stick is climate change.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you because you yourself said earlier that we might have 11 years to keep the Earth inhabitable for people, frankly, like your son, and I don't know how old the widow is, but Joe Biden today apparently is announcing a centrist plan on the climate. Does that really sound like something that's going to keep the Earth alive?
You have to reach across the aisle and negotiate with carbon dioxide. Otherwise, it's not going to work with you. And Joe Biden has a history of reasoning with climate change. That's how we defeated Hitler. I mean, I know, you lose the argument when you bring up Hitler, but we defeated Hitler. We sat down with him and said, we're reaching across the aisle, kill 6 million and stop there. You negotiate. It's all a numbers game. That's what Joe will do.
So if Joe Biden was president in the 30s, he would have offered the 6 million deal for Hitler.
He would have gone in low.
Is that what Rob Reiner said?
And he would have said Hitler's a decent guy.
Right.
That's all. That's the key to all of it.
Was Hitler middle class?
Come in. Hitler was middle class. Yes, very bourgeois in his thinking.
Right.
But don't get me started on that because you just had a guest on. I don't about socialism. Hitler was a socialist. So I don't want to get in there. It's in the name Nazi.
Right.
It's an acronym. I don't want to get too smart for you because I'm lording my supreme intellectual knowledge over you. But I was watching Ladder with Crowder, and he told me that Nazi means socialism.
Right.
So he was a socialist.
Well, I can't argue with that. I don't have. So
just listen. Let me ask you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hang on.
Go ahead.
I don't mean to be a bully. and because I'm trying to bring everybody into the tent, okay?
Right.
And
in principle,
and I'm welcoming. And am I being likable here?
Very.
Am I being likable?
Very. I would say middle
Likeable,
class.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you. And you know, I've had tragedy in my life,
Yes.
year after year. I've been incredibly unlucky. If you look at my biography,
Right.
One tragedy after another, and I've never won an election other than senator from Delaware. But I'm going to bring all my good luck to America. That's what I want to do, is bring all my good luck that I've had in my life to America. Because I'm a lucky guy, and I think luck rubs off on a nation. But Rob Reiner, that's what Rob Reiner told me. And he cares, Rob Reiner. And he directed The Ghosts of Mississippi. Did you see Ghosts of Mississippi?
It was very powerful.
Great movie.
I think I saw some of it on TNT before I was trying to find a basketball game. But yes.
Yeah. That is a movie. Let me just say something to you young people. Rob Reiner directed Ghosts of Mississippi. And that is a movie about, I don't know who the black guy was, but it was something about voting in the South
Right.
and trying to get into his house. Anyway, it's like it really taught me the importance of black people, and we have to something with them. I'm nervous. I can't remember what Ghost of It. I know it was about a black guy, and Alec Baldwin was thin back then. And
you support civil rights in principle.
Civil rights, yes.
Right.
And you know why we have civil rights in this country?
Why?
We went slowly on it.
Right. Well, that was what MLK was about. I mean, and also reaching out to the middle class. That was why he was in Tennessee, to organize the middle class.
Huh?
He was in Tennessee to organize a middle class march.
Yeah, the garbage strike.
Yeah, the rally to restore sanity with Dr. King.
Yes, it's so easy.
Right.
So and what I love as a comedy writer is Dr. Martin Luther King said, incrementalism is a sin. And as a comedy writer, I appreciate his sarcasm. When he said incrementalism is a sin, I go, God, this guy is using wit and comedy. He's got it. Like he would have killed at the White House Correspondents' Dinner with that kind of stuff.
That actually,
your listeners,
could you imagine though?
Everybody's here tonight. Dana Bash is here. BuzzFeed was here, but Facebook changed the algorithm on them. No, I'm just kidding. How's everybody doing?
All right. Well, you know what?
You got any movie recommendations for us, David?
Yeah, everything by Rob Reiner. if Rob Reiner directs, let me tell you something. When it comes to how to live your life, here's a general rule of thumb.
Yes.
Always ask first, what would Rob Reiner do? That's the key to life. What would Rob Reiner do? Would Rob Reiner eat this?
Yes.
Would Rob Reiner approve of this?
I don't know.
Rob Reiner's voting for Biden.
I know,
What
Rob
more do you
Reiner.
need to do?
Jesus Christ. Rob Reiner really.
I have the perfect running mate. Want to know who I think the perfect running mate for
Biden? Rob Reiner.
I'm sorry?
Rob Reiner.
I wish, but he's got to make more great movies.
Yeah, right.
Like The Bucket List.
Who should be Biden's running mate?
Well, I kind of wish maybe we can get like a Kickstarter campaign that raises about $1 million for me to move to Los Angeles and lobby Rob Reiner to run for president. And, if we can get $1 million, I could, set up a 501c3 and pay my kids a salary.
One of the things I like about I would think one of the things I like about your podcast is you really do have a very detailed understanding of how modern politics works, and I think you're demonstrating that in your Kickstarter.
I don't know what. Well, I think I think it's a good use of Kickstarter. But anyway,
I think you should have moved to the right, David. I think you could be headlining CPAC. You're a lot fun. You're much funnier than Dennis Miller, and people might understand what your references are.
I hate those people in principle, and they sicken me. And you saw me. I was at the Javits Center when Hillary lost, and you've seen pictures of me. Yeah, I couldn't get out of bed
for a month.
I couldn't get out of bed for 5 days. I couldn't get out of bed for 5 days when Hillary lost. And I lead with that at parties. People have to know up front that I hate Donald Trump.
Right, of course.
Everybody needs to know that I hate Donald Trump. But that's who I am.
It's a real differentiator. Because there's a lot of people it's a real differentiator because in journalists and entertainment and comedy circles in Manhattan, as an example, you run into a lot of people that like Donald Trump.
Yeah, I hate him.
Yeah,
I hate him.
No.
Oh, I hate that man. Hate him. I always lead with that, especially in Hollywood. When I'm with Rob Reiner, I just go to his cocktail parties and they don't get David started on Donald. Ooh, I hate him. Visceral. It's visceral. Ooh. And then people like me. And then I have to remind people that we have a constitutional crisis.
Right.
And these things only happen every 6 months.
Right. But that somehow we can't do anything about it because Democrats are constitutionally mandated to do nothing. Because we got to win.
Do nothing. No, you're twisting my words to remind us of how great things were once upon a time, right, and that we're better than this. That's the role of Democrats, to tell us who we are. When there's a shooting, anybody can outlaw guns when you're the president. Sign an executive order,
right?
Taking away the NRA. Obama could have taken away the NRA's tax-exempt status, but he did something more important when that church was shot up. He said, "That's not who we are." And then he sang Amazing Grace. That's...
one of the most devastating parts of a Feldman bit, or when it's like, yes, that's literally exactly what happens. Yes.
This is not a bit. This is like, why do you think this is a bit?
I apologize.
Anyway, here's who I think Joe's running mate could be.
Okay, tell me.
Okay.
Yes.
And and this is my being an adult. Okay.
Yes, please.
You know how Joe has listen, Joe has a woman problem. He's not perfect, right?
Sure. So who should his running mate be?
Okay, hear me out.
Okay.
Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete. Now,
wait. How would this solve his woman problem?
Because he's gay. Did you know that Mayor Pete is gay?
I knew that he's gay, and I know that he's a gentrifier and a military guy. That's what I know about Mayor Pete, and he gets it.
Yeah, but he's gay.
Okay,
but he's gay.
Right, so
did you know that he's gay?
Yes, I did know that. Yes.
Okay. And I agree with you. I have a lot of problems with Mayor Pete. Rob Reiner is furious at him for what went on in South Bend. There was something with the African American police chief that he fired, and something demolishing black people's houses, something black people being rounded up by it's a Ghost of Mississippi thing. Rob, you should rent the movie. I know I'm swearing. But, he's got a problem with the black people. And believe me, a mayor running a city, and by the way, that's a lot of responsibility to be running the fourth largest city in Indiana. I mean, that is, he's up against a lot. So, yeah, whatever, something with the blacks.
Isn't there a mayor from Florida who runs a city that's bigger than Mayor Pete, who nobody's paying any attention to. I don't even know the guy's name.
Is he gay?
He's a black man.
Is he gay?
He's an African-American man. He's black.
No.
So, what the hell?
Does he go slowly on things?
I think he does. Well, I think unfortunately I think the problem with him is that he supports fully abolishing ICE. So you guys might not be as excited. That doesn't sound very middle class, I guess.
Oh, I hate ICE. Oh, I stay with Rob Reiner. And I hate it. Ooh, I hate what they're doing. I hate what they're doing to Rob Reiner's cleaning people. I hate them. And
does Rob Reiner have a poster welcoming refugees that he shows to the people that clean and maintain his home? Refugees are welcome here.
He tells the undocumented workers who work for him, I've been there. He said, "Do not talk to ICE. You'll be violating the Logan Act." You cannot talk to foreigners. It's a violation of the Logan Act. And, they're going around. I stay with Rob Reiner when I'm in Hollywood. Right. I'm not trying to lord my relationship, but, he's got 7 undocumented workers working for him, and we're terrified that they're going to get rounded up for ICE. So what we did on Wednesday was we got them an Uber. A big Uber, and took them. We sprung for an Uber just on Wednesday.
You wanted to make sure because maybe what some people don't know. I don't know if you know, but the Uber and Lyft drivers were striking because the companies have them in an indentured servitude system and they can't make a living, and so they were asking people not to use the services on Wednesday afternoon, and that was the time that you and Rob chose to send his undocumented cleaning people away from his home to evade ICE in an Uber. Do I understand you correctly?
I don't know what you're talking about. You're saying Uber? That's ride sharing. You have a car. It's capital. That's like Uber is socialism. You of all people should know that it's ride sharing. Remember?
Right. Well, I do remember. I think that was the first branding for these services in about like 2013 and 14. Yes.
As a socialist, I can't believe you're putting down Uber. I have a car. You need to go somewhere. I'll share my car with you. It's beautiful, like Airbnb. I'm going to share my home with you. Why would you make fun of that?
Well, I think I'm making fun of it because I think the execution is different than the sales pitch. So you're going through an app. Yeah.
I don't know. You lost me at execution. I'm against capital punishment.
In principle?
No, I'm against capital punishment. I believe.
All right, fair enough.
Let me ask you a question about Uber, though.
Yes.
If Uber's so bad as you say it is, why is Ariana Huffington on the board of directors?
Because
Ariana Huffington. Do you know who Ariana Huffington
I do. I mean, you do know that there was a lot of controversy at Huffington Post about, not paying people for blog posts, maybe some not great labor practices.
It's work sharing. It's a sharing economy. It's work sharing.
It's work sharing.
It's work sharing.
I believe when people were fired at Huffington Post, I think it was that they were disengaged. Was what they called it. Disengaged.
I think they weren't getting enough sleep, and I think that's what.
You've been reading Ariana's work on the sleep revolution?
I think that Ariana came back to the Huffington Post. She looked around and said, "You know what? You have bags underneath your eyes. You need more sleep. You're fired. Go home and sleep. Hopefully you'll be depressed. You should go into a depression, so you'll just stay in bed all day. And that's the best thing for your health. It's just to be depressed, immobile, have no money. almost like disappear, fall through the cracks, so you can just focus on your sweep. That's what Ariana was trying to do for them.
So it was actually
she didn't make any money off it. What?
So it was altruistic. So David,
I'm sorry, I
you're
didn't hear what you said.
I said it was altruistic. David, we only have like a minute left or so, but I just have to say you're a horrible person. You were like
in
everything.
In principle.
Every single evil tendency of the modern media and Democratic Party and corporate practice, you are embodying from Rob Reiner to Uber. I mean, Jesus, you're terrible.
You know what?
Joe Biden to Ariana Huffington.
Is this a sarcasm thing that you're doing?
No, I'm not.
Or do you really mean that I'm horrible?
I'm not sophisticated enough to do sarcasm. I speak from the gut.
Do you really think I'm a horrible person?
Middle class. I mean, David.
I'm sorry.
This is horrible. It is. It's horrible.
But I hate Trump. How can I be horrible if I hate Trump? And you know, I talk really loud at Starbucks about the constitutional crisis and pound the table and how I want to punch. Like I hate Bill Barr.
Right, you want to hit him.
I want to punch him. Take him out behind the schoolyard and punch him. How am I a horrible person? The first thing I open with is I hate Trump.
This is becoming so triggering. This is like why I don't watch MSNBC. It's just a bunch of absolutely horrible people who think that recognizing that Donald Trump is a horrible human being is some type of exemplary behavior. What do you want, a cookie?
I love you, man.
I love you
what
so
Matt
much.
Taibbi says
Please.
on your show. I love. Huh?
No, I just got to say to people, please. I don't listen to many podcasts, but I listen to your podcast almost every episode. It's great, and the commentaries, even the bit on Uber. I mean, I know that you just did this really smart insight, like this history of the rideshare scam. You do a commentary, then you. I mean, what other show are you going to have Ben Burgess and then Jackie the Joke Man Martling on?
By the way, Ben Burgess, before I know we're at it, I love you, man.
I love you too.
Sam, you're the best. But Ben Burgess has really turned me on to Marxism.
Yeah.
I owe you for that, so thank you. And, you know, we're all in this together in all seriousness, and I mean this, that, you know, we're all part of the same fabric of the universe. And I've learned that because you've allowed Ben Burgess to come on and my show and teach me about Marxism. So I'm going to ask you for a favor.
Sure.
Don't take this the wrong way. I need exclusivity with Ben. He can only do my show. I think pushing Marxism is a zero-sum game.
Right.
There are winners and losers, and I'm poaching your Marxist professor because I want to be the number one purveyor of Marxism on the internet. I think I can win this way.
Well, I support that in principle.
Thank you.
David Feldman, please. I love you
so
so much.
I love your show. I love Sam's show, and I love your show, and I love when you like talk to Professor Richard Wolff and go, so what's the deal with your dad? You ever kick it with them? You still get along with your dad? I love how you probe into their personal life. Get them to talk about their struggles.
He's doing a fucking Marin bit. I have Richard Wolff on. I go like, you studied Althusser, but who are your guys? Who are your guys? Lenin, man. I tried to read Lenin once after a terrible breakup. I love you, David.
I love you. Thank you. Let's get coffee or something.
Of course. I'll text you.
Okay.
All right. Bye. Seriously, I'm a big fan of the David Feldman podcast. He's so funny, and he's also like he's there. There's a similarity with Sam in the sense that, I mean, I guess Sam is like basically, at this point more commentator journalist than comedian. But like David's maybe still a little bit more comedian, but he will do 20 minutes on stock buyback policy as well. Guy is highly policy fluent in addition to being so funny. All right, we don't have that much time left, so we're going to get to the fun half, and we're definitely going to get to this Ben Shapiro clip. We're going to get to Bernie talking about this great new bill that he just unveiled with AOC. A little bit of an interview with Lula, and we'll take some IMs. But I have a feeling we'll probably spend a lot of time on this Ben Shapiro thing. Become a member of the Majority Report today, majority.fm/become a member. That's how this show happens. Check out the Antifada on Patreon. Matt, what's going on with Literary Hangover?
The Song of Hiawatha by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow will be out tomorrow.
Go to patreon.com/TMBS for a huge amount of content. Tuesday, Emma Viglin's coming in studio, and also Michael Brooks Show on YouTube. We'll see you in the fun half.
You are in for it.
All right, folks, 646-257-3920. See you in the fun half.
Are you ready?
Who sent us this?
Alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just as delicious as you can imagine.
The alpha males are back. Boys back. And the alpha males are back.
Just want to degrade the white man.
Alpha males are back.
I take all of it in my throat.
Alpha males are back.
Almost says what?
The alpha males are back.
You are a madman.
And the alpha males are back.
I am a total cunt.
Can we bring back DJ Dannerky's song, please?
Yeah, or a couple of them. Just put them in rotation.
DJ Dannerky.
Well, the problem with those is they're like 45 seconds long, so I don't know if they're enough of a break for people.
That's fucking nonsense.
Hey, folks, reminder.
I do not have Parkinson's.
And the alpha males are
psych. Fuck them.
Almost says what? Almost says what?
Hell of a lot of bank. 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 Hell of a lot of bank.
All lives matter. Have you tried doing an impression on a college campus?
I think that there's no reason why reasonable people across the divide can't all agree with this. Psych.
And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black. African. And the alpha males are back. And the Africans are black.
See Donald Trump out there, doesn't a little part of you think that America deserves to be taken over by jihadists? Keeping it 100. Can't knock the hustle. Come on, fuck 'em. Things I do for the bigger game plan. By the way, it's my birthday. Happy birthday to me, Jew boy.
I have a thought experiment for you.
And the alpha males are back. Africans are black. Alpha males are back. Africans are black.
Come on. What? Come on. Someone needs to pay the price for blasphemy around here.
I am a total pussy.